All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Eavesdropping. People talk all the time about wanting to be a fly on the wall. So when Rebecca and I talked about doing this, we said, "Oh, what? Oh, eavesdropping." So this is you have permission to eavesdrop. And I just know with all the stuff going on in the world, I've had several friends call and say, "I don't know what to say. How do I talk about it?" And I've even felt that. I have some friends that we're close, we're work close, but we never really go past anything topical. So we thought this made a lot of sense, and hopefully it can help some people. So in full transparency, we really haven't practiced, because if we practiced, then it wouldn't be authentic. We just talked about topics and said we were just going to be all in. So we're going to be vulnerable too. But let me tell you about Dr. Rebecca Morgan. Okay. I've known Rebecca almost 18 years, and I realized that because I was pregnant with my youngest son when she and I worked together at Disney World. And we're not friends, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I would say we were colleagues that had mutual respect, and we've kind of popped in and out of touch. She's in California now. I'm in Florida, so we're on the opposite ends. But I just couldn't have thought of someone who I'd rather have this conversation with, who I know is open and willing to learn. And so that is Dr. Rebecca.
Oh, thank you, Dee. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to see you and talk to you after all these years. And once upon a time, we shared that office together, right? We sat side by side in office, and we had a heck of a lot of conversations on so many topics. And my gosh, I think about you as this senior leader in HR sharing this office with the newbie that I was at the time. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But it was amazing. And we just had great dialogue and great conversations, which I so appreciate and reflect on today. And I love the fact that we can just pick up and continue to have them. And I think it's so important to have them, especially now, because like you said, gosh, what do we say? And so, you know, I just want to ask, like, start off by, with everything that's going on in the country, like, how are you? How are you feeling?
You know, I'm encouraged, right? I'm not saying that I don't have days that I'm stressed or that it's overwhelming, but I'm encouraged because it's finally out there. People are having the conversations. I felt like I knew it was real, but a lot of people didn't know it was real. And so, you know, there are people that are just now, I'd say in the last month, going, oh, systemic racism is still happening. You know, we had a Black president. I thought everything was on even keel. And I always knew it wasn't. I felt it wasn't. I could see it, feel it, hear it, almost taste it. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. It's so silly. So I was getting ready for this, and I was saying to myself, oh, is this too ethnic, right? I mean, is it too Black? I mean, and I don't know, Rebecca, but have you ever said when you're about to get ready, is this too white? If I wear these earrings, are they going to think I'm too white? Right? But those are the things you think about, right? I mean, and I'm pretty comfortable in my skin, so I'm not somebody that over rotates, but you know that matters. And your ability to move in an organization is two things, right? It's doing your job, which is a given, but it's making other people comfortable with you, which is a whole nother situation that we probably shouldn't have to deal with. So I'm okay. I got some friends that aren't. I'm not great, but I'm okay. And I'm okay because I feel like sometimes the ugly has to happen before the change occurs. So what happened to George Floyd was horrific, but I do think it pricked our consciousness. And so I've had more conversation, and I've seen more people that don't look like me taking up the cause and becoming more of an ally. So yeah, so I'm good.
Good. Yeah, it's hard. And I think that's, it's really hard to ask that question. I think it was really hard because you don't know what the reaction is going to be, right? And I think
but it's better to ask. I think not asking it is it's tone deaf, right? So, and I think that's what happened before. Before, stuff would happen. I remember the Charlottesville thing, and people are kind of just back to work as usual. Or the thing that happened when the people got killed in it's not Charlottesville, but it's Charleston. They got killed in the church, and one of the people in the church was actually one of my sorors that had gone to college with me. And it was just like, go to work as usual. Nobody says anything, and you're literally traumatized. Some people joke and say, going to work while Black. You know, I mean, I think the benefit of us working remote, a lot of people, is you're not necessarily having to deal with the emotions in front of everybody.
Right.
But what about you? Because it's hard too, because you don't know what to say. I mean, do people say things to you, or kind of, what are you feeling?
Well, it's hard because, you know, we are told, one of the things I was told was, you don't talk about race. It's one of those things you just don't talk about. And especially in the workplace, especially bringing it up, you kind of like, oh, and you dance around it. And you probably see me dancing right now a little bit around it. And so we have this authentic relationship where we have asked and talked some really hard stuff together. And you've coached me and we've coached each other. And it's still hard, but I think that's part of the process, that you cannot have change until you talk about it, until you address it, until you start to see things differently and have the conversation and the questions. So that's why I want to have it, because I have questions and I don't know what to say. And I'm sure I'm coming across like, oh gosh, right?
You're coming across authentic, and that's why we didn't practice, because it's awkward and people talk about being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but you don't grow when you're comfortable. And I say, and I mean this sincerely, this ain't somebody turned dogs on loose uncomfortable, right? It's not getting knocked down with water hose uncomfortable.
No. Oh my goodness, no.
Get over ourselves a little bit and say, you know, lying. Let's have the conversation, right? There was a sign that I saw that I loved. It said, white silence is violence. And that was deep. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
The only people saying stuff are the people being impacted, then it's hard to change things by yourself, right? If we could have changed it, you know, 400 years ago, we would have never been slaves, right? I mean, let's just keep it real. So we need everybody engaged so we can create this perfect union, and especially at work, because I think it's most awkward at work.
Oh, absolutely. I can only imagine, because again, it was one of those things we're told not to talk about. And now, is it okay to talk about it? So can we bring that up? And how do we bring it up? Like, that's one thing I would love to ask with the work you're doing, because I really love the work you're doing with your company now, to have that authentic conversation and be that authentic company. And like, so how is it best to bring up these conversations at work? Like, how do you do it? Because I think you made a really good point that we're not necessarily in the office per se. So there's like a kind of like a barrier. But we're going to go back one day. And even if we're not back, we are in Zoom meetings and we're checking in with people. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the baseline, though, is you should have a relationship. I'm not saying if you don't have a relationship, you can't have a conversation, but there's a big trust piece that is missing. And at least if you have a relationship and you have mutual respect and trust, it's easier to start the conversation. And I think it's kind of just like what you did. How are you doing? You know, I know there's a lot going on. You know, I was so sorry to see the George Floyd murder. I mean, really, how are you doing? Maybe I've never asked before because maybe I didn't know to ask, or I think it's great to say what you said. I was told not to talk about it. Like everybody says they're colorblind. I roll my eyes when they say that because it's but people were told that. I just think letting somebody know that you care about them it will open up the dialogue. And you know, one size doesn't fit all, right? Black folk are not a monolith. There may be some people that don't want to talk about it. It could be that they are introverted. It could be they're still processing. But I think asking at least shows some level of concern.
Excellent. All right. I have a couple things I wanted to ask. I know we talked about it, that there was 3 things we wanted to hit on this conversation, right? And so I want to ask, so I see the names out there, and I see the Karen ones. Karen, I would love to hear about Karen and your experience with Karen, if you've experienced a Karen. And this is coming from someone with the name Rebecca, which is Becky, right? Before Karen, there was Becky.
Right.
And so now I don't necessarily like the label of a Karen or a Becky, right? Personally.
No, I get it.
But there is I think there is some good in it, in calling out those behaviors. So I just love to hear your experience.
I think the word is colloquialism. It's just a term to categorize primarily white women who allegedly want to help, but the behavior really hurts. And I think the most notorious Karen, for lack of a better description, was the situation in Central Park, right? With Amy, I think her name is Amy Cooper, who called the gentleman who was, you know, was African American, told her, hey, you should put the dog on the leash. She didn't want to do it. she called the police on him. But the part that hurt so much is she feigned fear when he wasn't even coming toward her. And I think what people don't realize is that could have been the end of his life. You know, it didn't matter that he was intelligent with all these degrees and he was articulate. Calling the police on a Black person, especially a Black man, can turn out very differently because you don't have an opportunity to have the conversations. And unfortunately, it happens a lot. I mean, I see it all the time on my feed. Think about all the times that people don't record it. And so I don't know why certain people feel like they can police our bodies. They can police the spaces that Black people in. And so Karen, I guess in the scheme of things, is a nice way to kind of go, oh, here we go again. And I know in this case, Amy Cooper, she worked for, I think, like a financial services firm. She's like, I'm liberal. I voted for it. And it's like, yeah, but there's so much bias. And a lot of the bias is built into the systems, right? So a lot of us are biased when we don't even know it. And I don't know if anybody's done the Harvard implicit bias test, but it's not just white people that's biased against Black folk. Black folk are biased against Black folk because we all are being exposed to, listening to, hearing the same thing, seeing the pictures, the standards of beauty, all of these things. And so the bias becomes a part of the system without realizing it. So, I mean, I don't know if I like the word Karen but I think it's a way of categorizing and grouping. So think about unconscious bias, you do grouping. It's a way of grouping. So when people go up, so-and-so is a Karen, we understand. And we have a question that says, what can white people do to dismantle Karen culture? I think try to help, right? I mean, I like the fact that people want to get involved, but assume good intent, right? There have been situations where they go, I've never seen you in this apartment complex and you're at the pool. Where do you live? I mean, it's the approach. So you're assuming that I don't belong. So that's one of the things. If you don't want the Karen culture, then, hey, how you doing? Welcome to the neighborhood, or I've not seen you in the pool before. And if you have just friendly general conversation, you'll be fine. But people are getting defensive too, right? So I'm not saying that there aren't Black folk that's like, why are you asking me? Because you're asking in a way like you don't belong here.
Right. And I'm sure, there's been probably, we have not had those experiences, right? I've never had anyone at a pool ask me, you don't live here. Where are you from? Like, I've not had that. So I can't imagine really what it would be like.
Yeah, it's frustrating because the filters that we have come with us based on all our experiences, right? So it may not be the fact that you just asked that, but I've dealt with all these other things.
Yeah.
So I don't believe your intent is pure. And you're not asking me because you want our kids to play together. You're asking me because when you looked at me, you made an assumption that I don't belong here. And how can you make that assumption? And then you're trying to police me. I'm going to call, remember Barbecue Becky? It was just so many things. We just live in our life and somebody's jumping in and making threats of harm. And I just, and I'm not saying that there aren't times you should call the police. I'm not saying if it's something really dangerous that you shouldn't, because we all want to have that privilege. But if it's something that's not threatening, doing that, and it floods memories, right? I mean, you think about it, Emmett Till and all these folk, they were killed because, whether it was a Karen or whatever, he looked at me funny, right? And that could mean somebody's life ended. So it's just get to know the person, and just, if you're curious, you can ask in a way, but when you're intrusive, it's hard to assume good intent. And I mean, I still try. Like, I made a joke when I was posting this. I was like, don't take people off your Facebook, because I had a lot of people saying, oh, I'm getting rid of, and I'll say in all honesty, I haven't deleted anybody off of my Facebook page since all this has been going on. Well, because I want people to learn. And I think if you cut them off, they don't learn.
Right. I tell you, I think it's amazing, Dee. I can't say I've done the same. I can't say I've not done the same. And yeah, there's some folks that I have disassociated with because it's.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I just hope, it's like even when you do diversity and inclusion training, some people go out of force, but you hope that there's some nugget that they learn that may help them change their life. Because another thing I think you can do to dismantle it is start doing some research, right? Doing some reading. White Fragility is a really good book. How to Be Anti-Racist. Those are the kind of books that you can start getting it, because think about it. You've been told all your life the playing field is even. Don't talk about race. It's fine. Everybody has the same opportunities. You could legitimately kind of be in denial, right? You may not know. And so then all of a sudden there's all this stuff going on. You're like, wait a minute. And then you got all the media saying different things. Some people are going, oh, they just playing the race card. So I think a person could legitimately be confused. And I think the George Floyd kind of cleared up the confusion. Rebecca, when did you start realizing things don't quite seem fair?
Recently, I think the events have really brought it to life for me. I think I've always realized things were not equal. Always. I remember being in school and seeing the blue eye, brown eye experiment that the teacher did in the late 60s. And it, yes, rocked my world. I remember going home and just talking about it. And like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine. And it just, back then it changed. And then studying psychology and things, we bring that case up a lot of times too. And you're like, wow, the study and the students and watching them later in life. And you're like, huh. But I tell you, I think you go about, living in China, I call it a bubble. Like, you live in your bubble, and I live in a bubble sometimes, and I'll admit it. And it's safe and I think we all have bubbles, right? But I think we're safe in our bubble, and it's this, but then it's important to go outside of it. And I think all the events have really just, wow, brought things to life, and realized just how much I don't know, and how much lack of awareness. And being so-called educated, you realize how much I don't, that I'm not educated. So I'm spending personally a lot of time, relearning and unlearning things I've known, and relearning, and then and asking the questions. And it's like having these conversations as well, which thank you and sharing, because you're like, let me hear from your perspective, because again, I have no idea. I have no clue.
Right.
And I think there's been times that I pretended I did. Oh yeah, I know. Oh, I've had an experience like that. No, I haven't.
Right.
I have not.
Yeah, I like this. It says, from a psychological perspective, do you think that people can overcome these biases that manifest into negative behaviors? Yeah, you can, but you have to be intentional, right? First of all, you have to acknowledge it. I think the thing I'm most pleased about is people are finally acknowledging that this is happening. It's not our imagination. You'd be surprised at the times that you didn't get the job or the promotion because you were Black, and when you try to talk to people about it, they look at you like you have 5 heads.
Oh, I'm sure that's not true. Right. I'm sure I have said it. No, they're not like that. No, there has to be a reason.
Right. And so you're like, I'm not crazy, but I think it's being intentional.
Feel it.
It's slowing down, right? There's a book, Fast Brain, Slow Brain. I can't remember the guy that wrote it, but he talked about your fast brain. When you're making fast decisions, it's kind of like fight or flight. And in the past, we needed it, right? Caveman days, you see somebody from another tribe, are they gonna eat me or shake my hand? I don't have a lot of time. Boom, categorize them. But those quick decisions are where the bias comes in, because your brain is doing a shortcut, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing a shortcut, and it's categorizing people. And just keep it real. If you don't have a relationship with anybody Black, then your data about Black people is probably what you got from TV. And the TV is very biased. But one of the things that is shown is if you start having an authentic relationship with the other, whatever that other is to you, then you have real data to put in there, so you don't automatically see the Black person and assume threat, right? You could see the Black person and assume friend. Somebody that I went to church with or go to school with, somebody that I like. But it takes intentionality, because to your point, we are kind of in a bubble. And so I think it's being intentional, slowing down, and spending some time with other people to really hear their stories, and don't listen to respond, listen to learn, and go, you know what, maybe I was off a little bit. Maybe things aren't as in line as I thought they were.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about when thoughts or things pop up, because like you said, it's natural. The brain, they pop up and it's the fear, right? It's fight or flight, all these things. We're very complex as humans. And so when these things pop up, I spend a lot of time going, is it true? Like, how do I know it's true, right? Like when they do pop up and you might have a sense like, oh, that's different or whatnot. Okay, but is it true? And that's how I try to process it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's work. I mean,
it is. And
it's work because you're overcoming
right.
a lot of
It won't
things.
change if we're not intentional. And some
Mm-hmm.
of us know what our biases are, and so you have to kind of set them aside. But you have to acknowledge that this stuff is real to be able to address it. And what part am I going to play in it? How am I going to help things get better? Or, you know, can I ignore it? Because I think for a lot of people, it's not that they didn't care, but it didn't impact them, right?
Right.
I mean, life is busy. We got all this stuff going on. This is not impacting me. So I'm just going ahead about my normal day. I wouldn't do anything openly racist. I mean, come on, you know, I'm not racist, right? Some of my best friends, you know, fill in the blank. But if you're not doing anything to dismantle it, yeah, I mean, you're a part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do now personally is speak up a lot more. So you might not see me posting, and you might not be sharing my opinions and my thoughts over everything, because I personally didn't feel like, not that my voice didn't matter. I think mine didn't really need to be the one adding to the conversation at this point. We need to have other people's voice be highlighted and their experiences, right? Because mine, honestly. And so, but I think now it's really just when I see something, say something. We all say that, see something, say something. No, that doesn't feel right. That kind of came across wrong. And it's hard having those conversations. Like I've had to have them with family members and friends, and it's really hard. But I think that's what's so important, is to keep everything moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right? We're at this point, we have to.
Mm-hmm. And some of it is curiosity. So we were going to talk about hair.
Okay. Oh, yes.
I have a funny story about my hair. So I have locks now, and I will tell you, I've not always worked in places where I could have these lovely locks. So I got them now, and I love them. But I was in the airport, my husband and we were going somewhere, and he said, you know, that lady was touching your locks. And I'm like, what? Now, I am, you know me, I don't have like this big personal space. And I didn't react because I knew it was curiosity. Now, I would say disclaimer, don't try this at home, because you may not get the black girl magic. You may get that angry black woman, because nobody wants to be petted on. But I understood that she was curious. Now, she probably could have asked, and I would have. If she had said, can I touch your hair? I would be like, yeah, because that's me. Everybody won't do that. But I mean, hair is so critical. Can you imagine saying, I have to do something different because my hair is not professional? So the way I was born, the way the hair grows out of my head, it's not acceptable. So I just think we shifted. Oh, Michelle said your voice does matter. Comment. So your voice, and it does matter. But it was like, and the thing is, we all start thinking the same thing, because my dad and those, you know, they were a lot younger, not younger. They were in civil rights movement a lot older. So you had to assimilate to get along. So they didn't do the braids and the this and the that. You know, they did the lie and the we call it creamy crack, which is another word for relaxers, to try to straighten your hair. And it causes so much damage, because if your hair didn't look professional, which let's just say it, professional was white, right? So the closer your hair looked to being like white hair, the more professional it was. Now things are shifting now. So people are wearing naturals and other stuff. But in the past, you wouldn't get hired. I mean, I had locks for probably 2 jobs. And I think my 3rd job is when I took the wig off, because it was still growing. It wasn't the length that I quite liked. But I know that it's judged, and we can pretend that it's not. But I know it is. When I would coach college students, so depending on their locks, I'd be like, I'm not saying you have to change, but it's probably going to be a little harder for you to get the job, because there are all these assumptions that even go with hairstyles.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't imagine someone coming up and say, can I touch your hair? Now, living in China, people took pictures of me a lot because I looked different, but no one ever came up and tried to touch me or ask if they can touch me. I can't even imagine what that experience is like.
She got the right one though, because I didn't really care, but a lot of people are like, what do you need? Or comments like if you had like tiny braids, do you do that every night? Yeah, I only sleep 2 hours, and the other 8 hours I'm doing my hair. Right now, in all fairness, people may not know how long it took, but it's just some of the things. And but again, though, it shows that you probably weren't around a lot of Black people, so you didn't know what to say or what to do.
What to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a hair question I wanted to ask. I can't remember. Okay.
I remember another situation when
What?
I was an employee where they were deciding whether my hair was appropriate, right? And it was a white man. You don't know anything about hair. It was like, because we couldn't lock, and I think I got my hair in twists. It was like, are those locks or are those twists? And it's like, I mean, I understood it because it was a part of the policy and it wasn't personal. But can you imagine how that feels? Somebody's almost like inspecting you, like, girl, I'm a kinder, gentler D, but it was like, what?
And do you think it's because it's so different? We're not, people aren't used to it in whatever circles, like in business. Is it because one's making the policy, didn't have exposure?
I think it was because people have decided what was professional.
What was professional?
But guess who's deciding what's professional? Primarily white folk. And the standard is typically the white look, right? So they can call it a certain look, but it's probably more of the white look. And so even Black folk do it. I mean, I had to catch myself the other day. It was crazy. Where was I? Oh, I was on a video call and somebody had their hair like in 2 braids. And you know how I think white people call it like French braids. And if a person had their hair in 2 like French going back, you wouldn't have thought anything. But it was a sister, and it was in a natural state, and her hair wasn't that long. And I caught myself going, she got on a Zoom call like that? So I'm saying we're conditioned. We literally have to stop and say, wait a minute, who decided what was professional? And how dare I look at something that is natural and say it's unprofessional? So we all do it. There's a question. You can read it. Do you see it?
Yeah, the culture of natural hair as unprofessional is also very persuasive within the Black community, not just coming from the perspective of outsiders.
Right, yeah, and that's it's true. I mean, I know my dad's like, what are you doing with your hair? I had somebody tell me, they saw like a picture of me with my hair locked in before when it was straight. You were so pretty when your hair was straight. They said it out loud to me, like my features changed when my hair changed, right? It was somebody Black. So it's just, we have been so conditioned into what's acceptable, what's pretty, what we should do, that so many of us have bought into it that we're not understanding. And like somebody else made in a comment, it's not appreciating. I mean, that's what makes it nice to me and beautiful, that we all don't look the same. Our hair is not the same. I mean, there is a variation, but man, some people really don't get it at all.
Is it true that some states, like I live in California, I feel very fortunate to live in California for many reasons, but Crown's Act here in California when it comes to hair. Now, it's true, like other states, you can get fired for how you wear your hair?
Yeah, because the EEOC said that hair alone, comments or things about your hair was not necessarily aligned with discrimination. So hair is not necessarily covered by the EEOC. So a lot of states have said, we're going to cover it, because most hair that people say are unprofessional is usually Black hair. I'm not saying it's not, and there's pink and purple and, but you know what? It's getting to the point that some of that is even more accepted, right? So yeah, so it's just, people come up with all kind of like, are you, what's the word? Not rebellious, but are you militant, right? If you're wearing a fro, does that mean you're militant? If I want to wear my hair natural, I'm militant. I just don't want to put dye. I don't want to put harmful chemicals. Right.
I mean, I remember permanent hair back in the 80s, my bangs. Like, that's a lot.
Right. Yeah, there's another question I like. What can companies do to mitigate these hair biases that aren't covered by the EEOC? Come up with your own policy, right? I mean, you don't have to wait for the government to tell you to do the right thing. Come up with your own policy. In a lot of cases, like LGBTQ was more recently pointedly covered, but it wasn't originally in the Title VII because, it wasn't, people weren't really doing that then. People were still covering and people weren't as open. But companies automatically, they said, you know what, once they started seeing the light, we're not going to do this. So they put the LGBTQ in their policies, although it wasn't the EEOC. So you can put it in your policies. Come on, companies, let's
Yeah.
Put it in your policies.
And do you suggestions like how can we bring that up in our companies? Like, should we be going to HR and having that conversation? Should we be going to our leader? I mean, that's another sticky conversation right there.
Yeah, I mean, I
They'd
think
be
you
like,
can,
this doesn't feel right.
yeah, but I think you could, but you can also write an anonymous letter, right? I like anonymous letters simply because if you fear retaliation, and let's keep it real, retaliation is real. Sometimes people don't do it, and they looking at you like, white girl, Rebecca, why do you care? This has nothing to do with you, right?
Right. Why should I've been told that before. Why are you getting involved in this? This has nothing to do with you.
Right, right. So an anonymous letter, I mean, as a person that's been in HR for 25 years, they always have to investigate. And when you write an anonymous letter, nobody knows how many people really feel that way. You can say a group of us are concerned that blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I mean, it's nice when you feel like you can do it face to face, but I know you had an article about everybody may have a different part to play. I mean, if you're not the most direct or outgoing, then, you know, maybe you shouldn't jump in the middle of something, but there are other ways to help. Yeah.
I like that. That's a really good suggestion. And, you know, a lot of times we teach if you can't say it to someone, you shouldn't be saying it. But I think in this case, it's so important that the issue gets out there where people do not feel valued and respected and can't show up to be themselves and do their best work, whatever it is. And if this is the way it has to go to be anonymous, that's saying something about the culture and the fear-based. And that's what we're trying to get a step away from.
It is.
So I think it's a great suggestion how to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way. I'm not saying that's the only way, but that's a way. And there's so much fear that sometimes that is a non-confrontational way to do it. And I think, you know, companies are starting to acknowledge and make statements, which once again, I take the acknowledgement because that's a start. 2 years ago, Black Lives Matter was considered like a fringe movement. You literally would have never had companies saying it. And now a lot of them are saying it. So I think it at least opened up the dialogue. I know one of the other things we talked about, and it's funny because I can't see the time, so I'm sure Erica's going to say, hey, we're getting close to time, but hijacking, I put on there, hijacking of diversity. And what I mean about that, and it's probably not intentional, but I discovered as I started doing D&I work that 80% of the budget was for women's issues right now. Let me say this. I don't think that we've come to parity with gender. So I understand and I appreciate that. But based on the United States, gender and race are different. And just because we're both women, and I respect that, and I think women should get paid the same as men, Black women and white women don't experience work or the world in the same way. And so there's a term called intersectionality. And a lot of times we ignore that, but I know of the McKinsey study of and Lean In, they talked about, every year they do a women at work study. And if you get into the meat of it, they talk about, you know, how women still haven't done this and they haven't done this and they're not represented. But there was a line, and I'll never forget, and it validated me. It says, but of all the women who have the hardest time and are treated the worst, it said are Black women. And I knew that, but I'm saying it validated it. And it's so interesting. There's another study called Black Women Ready to Lead by CTI, Center for Talent Innovation. And it talked about that Black women, we are not hesitant to lead. You know, whereas they did a lot of studies, sometimes, you know, depending on the situation, the white women were, well, you know, I'd like to stay home, or they didn't want to make more money. Well, we didn't have that kind of challenge because based on whether it was slavery when we got separated or other things, we knew a lot of times we had to lead the family. I mean, you know, the number of Black women that are single parents. And so we need the promotions, we need that, and we would go and we would get the education, but there was still always a barrier. And I like what someone posted. They said, let's not call the barrier being Black. That'll not change. The barrier isn't being Black. The barrier is the system that recognizes white is right. You know what I mean? And culture fit versus culture add is something that I rail against too, you know, because what does that mean? And I don't think, you know, psychology does have a lot to do with it. When they say, oh, so-and-so, I don't think they'd be a good culture fit. What does that mean?
What does that mean? That is one of the things I remember from our first office chats that you told me years ago. It was because we would always say right fit talent. It's all about right fit. Oh, they're not a right fit. And I remember that conversation so vividly where you were like, it's not about fit, it's about culture add. And wow, you're like, it is. Because So
what
is.
is it? I mean, because think about it. What I think people don't realize, what the brain does, whether intentional or unintentional. You think about the last person that just jumped on that team and was running or whatever. That person probably is, you know, a white male that went to college at some of these colleges that you all think are so great. And now that this 4-foot Asian woman or this black woman is sitting and interviewing, you thinking about the team and you thinking she's not going to fit. So you want a team of duplicates, right? You want robots. You know, what is it? What's the team missing? What about culture add?
Yeah. Because sameness.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need that. I mean, you get to answers quickly, but it's not usually the right answer for the best solutions, because you have all very similar perspectives. And I'm not saying that everybody that looks alike thinks the same. I'm not saying that at all, because you can have different styles, difference of opinion, but a lot of what makes the different thinking really also does come from culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had another question come in. What do you think about the phrase people use blind to color?
Yeah, I think it was taught, and this is, so I'm going to be fair. I think people were taught that that's what they should say, but it's not true. Every study you say says the first 3 things people notice about each other is their race, their sex, and their appearance, right? So first of all, it's a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not true.
Yeah.
And I read something, and I agree with this. They said, if anything, it makes things worse, because you're not acknowledging it. So then I can't voice it to you. If you say to me, we're about to have a conversation, you say, D girl, I don't see color. Color doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if I need to talk to you about how I felt I've been treated based on my color, you can't hear that.
Right. I'm not listening.
You're not listening.
You know,
You've already said it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I had someone on social reach out to me. They called me and said, I see you're doing this conversation with your colleague D. Wow. And they said something about it. They go, I don't know how you can do, it was something silly, but they said, I don't see color. And then they went off to me how they don't see color. And I said, oh, I see color. I see differences. I see everything every single day. I do. And I'll admit it. Like mine does. It's curious. It knows, it sees these things.
Oh, yeah.
But I think to the point, I think they're just saying, they're saying a lot of things in that, and they don't necessarily know. And is that
it's positive? They think it's saying that I treat everybody the same. But let me say this to anybody who's ever said that. I want you to see my color, right?
Yeah.
I love being black, right? It's a culture. I love, I mean, you know, the struggle is a struggle, but I love our resilience. I love our culture. I love my hair. It's strong and thick and beautiful. And I can love being black and also love you, right? It's not a zero-sum game. If I say, you know, black is beautiful and you're offended, we're saying that because we've had to learn to affirm ourselves, right? Because the standard was white. That's what people don't get. It's not saying that white's not beautiful or like white lives matter. It's not saying that at all. But we have to affirm ourselves because all of the messages have been the counter of black is beautiful. So we're trying to raise these little babies to love themselves. I know they did this test with baby dolls. They did it probably 30 years ago. And it was kids. It was little black kids, little white kids. And they would say, which baby doll is the pretty baby doll? They all picked the white baby doll. Which baby doll is the bad baby doll? They all picked the black baby doll. You see, I mean, and these are 3 and 4-year-olds, right? They did that study again about 5 years ago. Not much had changed. So we're trying to affirm ourselves. And so, and also if you see my color, you know a little bit about my story, right? So I don't want you to not see that, because then you're not really seeing me. There's a difference in how I've experienced the world. It's not always bad, but it's different. And to not even acknowledge it, I mean, it always annoyed me, but I'm telling you, people said it because that's what they were told. A lot of these parents that mean well are telling their kids, don't see color, treat everybody the same, you know, the golden rule. And that's fine, but the bias doesn't really allow that. And they don't realize that they're also biased. And a lot of the messages they're telling their kids is biasing them as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Really? Thank you.
Yeah, there's something, I think Erica sent us another color of a question. Can you see it in the chat?
Yeah, and some Black, Indigenous, POC have brought into the colorblind argument too, which is problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just
No,
one
because
way.
you've
It's
heard it
all
for so long, and you go, oh yeah, I'm colorblind. Oh, I don't want you to see my. Look, I'm gonna put my glasses down so you can see me roll my eyes.
okay.
I mean, come on. But once again, a lot of that is that's how you fit in, right? If you say that, then you'll fit in and it'll be easier. And, you know, I've always had a problem with the whole exceptionalism thing, right? You know, you're not like the other. You're different. You know, it's like the microaggressions. You know, you are so articulate. But, I mean, I got a master's degree. Am I supposed to split verbs like a prep chef, right? I mean, I'm being silly, but it's like what they don't realize, what they're saying is, I think most Black people are inarticulate. You're different. And so the whole exceptionalism, or you're just different, or, you know, when you go into the room and you're the only Black person, that doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like y'all aren't looking hard enough, because I know, like Michelle Obama said, that I'm not special. And I'm not saying that God didn't create us all special. He did. But what I'm saying is I'm not the only one. And so to make me feel better by dismissing or talking negative about my heritage isn't good. All right. So
Erica's keeping us on time.
I know, and I appreciate that. So
I do too.
Any other questions from the panel? Or, I mean, we've been doing questions as we go.
Yeah, we've been doing them as we go. I have more questions, Dee, so I would love to continue this conversation in the future as well, if we can, because I still have some more. I'd really like to, as I learn and try to unlearn and relearn, and I would love to hear more from your experience, because it's great.
The key is to just be honest, be authentic. I mean, I think now the new generation, I think they're much better than we are. I mean, they are getting it more. They're out there protesting more. I think they get it, because I think for them, they assumed that things were a little more even, because they saw, at least, you know, you didn't have the colored signs and the Black only signs, so it felt a little better. But then when this happened, I think it kind of pricked everybody's consciousness and it opened up everybody's eyes. So, I just think have real conversations. You know, if people know you care, they will share with you their perspective. And I will say it's hurtful. I had one good friend, and I know she loved me. I mean, we shared a lot of things, only at work, but I always felt there was a wedge because she never acknowledged it. So whenever I wanted to kind of bring up race, she would shift the topic. And so, I mean, I guess we're friends, but I don't know if I trust her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even look, and I think it's because in her mind, she didn't have a privileged background, right? So I think from her family, she was doing better than most of the people in her family, and they didn't have money and they didn't have all of these degrees. So I think in her mind, she thought I was privileged and she wasn't. I mean, and there are different types of privileges, right? But if I can't talk to you about it, then I'm going to have to love you from a distance, because you can't really see my experience, right? And even though you think I'm doing well, it's all relative, right? What does that mean? Right. So I would just say keep listening, keep learning, keep studying, and keep acknowledging that we were all created to be on this earth, and we can learn so much and share from each other. I just think keep having the conversations. Don't be afraid to have the conversations. The only really dumb question is the one you don't ask. But try to build a relationship, and, you know, let's just keep it going. I think that's it. If there are no other questions, I appreciate you guys joining us. This was fun, but it's real, right?
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Bye, Dee.
All right. Bye-bye.
I love you.
Okay. Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.